If you're looking to eat more protein, it can feel really tricky to go from 15 grams of protein to 30 grams of protein without relying on protein powders or lots of meat at every mealtime. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it, what I buy from the supermarket, and a simple formula that will turn any meal into a high protein meal. Hi, I'm Dr. Rupi. If you're new here, I'm a medical doctor and nutritionist, and my mission is to help you improve your health with food. So I'm not against eating meat at all, but if you want to stay healthier for longer, it's best to get a mix of different proteins with the majority of them coming from plants. Now, why is that? Plants aren't just protein. They contain an array of other nutrients that are super healthy for us. One being fiber that you tend not to get in animal-based protein, as well as other micronutrients and phytonutrients that can lower inflammation, lower your cholesterol, and keep your heart in good order for longer. For every 3% extra plant protein in your diet, it reduces your chances of chronic disease and helps you live longer. But it doesn't mean giving up meat. It's more about shifting the balance of your proteins more towards plants. And personally, I aim for around 70% coming from plant-based protein, or the rest coming from animal-based proteins, but it's completely up to you. And I have a system that makes it super simple and stress-free. Every time I go to the supermarket, I try and get high protein foods from 3 areas: the fridge section, freezer section, and pantry staple section. From the fridge section, I'm always thinking about dairy, eggs, lean meats, and plant-based proteins. Cheese is actually a really good source of protein. A lot of these proteins are accessible, they're delicious as well. I've got feta here, which is about 15 grams of protein per 100 grams. But cheese and that protein content exists on a really wide spectrum. You've got paneer or parmesan, which is super high in protein, around 35 grams of protein per 100 grams. And you've got cottage cheese, which is touted as being really high in protein, but it's around 9 to 10 grams of protein per 100 grams. But cheese is a great way to fold into meals, to add to sandwiches, to top your protein content. And if you're looking at yogurts, you want to be looking at strained yogurts. Things like Greek style or authentic Greek tend to be around 8 to 10 grams of protein per 100 grams. And then kefirs and fermented dairy, these are great. They're not unhealthy like we used to think. They've got this milk fat globule membrane around them that is cardioprotective, and the specific saturated fats may be cardioprotective or at least cardio neutral. Always look for unflavored dairy, because that way you are avoiding additives, sugars, and sweeteners. So just go for the plain dairy, and also look for ones with added probiotics. Cheese, particularly aged cheese, already has those benefits. But probiotic rich yogurts and dairy, these are things that are going to be great for your gut, as well as providing you with protein as well. Eggs, a simple medium-sized cooked egg is around 6 grams of protein. Again, we used to think that eggs were bad for us in terms of heart health, but actually we know that the yolk as well as the white has got a rich array of nutrients, and it's really about looking at your diet more holistically. I don't believe you should be having as many eggs as you want every single day. I think they can form part of a really healthy diet, particularly when you are diversifying your protein sources. Soy-based proteins, so tofu, I tend to go for extra firm. It's just easier to cook with. You can drain it easily, crumble it, put some olive oil and salt on, and bake it in the oven to make it go crispy. Tempeh deserves a special shout out because it is fermented, the soybeans are more bioavailable, and it has a wonderful benefit for your gut as well because of that fermentation process. I prefer to use raw tempeh and cook it myself, and again, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but we've got plenty of recipes at doctorskitchen.com to help you get started. I'm looking for lean cuts of all the different types of meat that I buy. For red meat, that would be something like a rump or a bavette instead of ribeye, which is really fatty and marbly. That's like a luxury occasion. For poultry, I'm looking for breast or chicken thigh without the skin. Fish is kind of like a free-for-all. The fats that the fish contain are generally omega-3 fatty acids. They're generally anti-inflammatory, and the ones I personally go for are oily fish. So things like anchovies, herring, sardines, salmon, and some white fish like monkfish. But you might have heard that meat or animal-based proteins are higher quality quality than plant-based proteins. Let's break that down. So whilst this is true when you look at protein absorption scores, animal-based proteins tend to be higher in terms of the bioavailability of these building blocks of protein called essential amino acids, of which there are 9 essential ones. But the thing about animal-based proteins is that they also tend to be higher in saturated fat and lower in fiber. So whilst they might be great on those individual scores, we want to be looking at our diet a lot more holistically. Plant-based proteins, on the other hand, tend to be low in a couple of these amino acids, which means that they score lower across these different scoring mechanisms. It's kind of like judging the team based on the weakest player. If it's low in just one of those amino acids, the whole plant-based protein gets marked down. In reality, what you need to be focusing on is getting enough total protein from multiple sources. This way, you don't need to rely heavily on just animal-based proteins, and you get all the other benefits of adding some plant-based proteins that we mentioned earlier. And no matter what your diet, whether you're omnivore or you're vegan or vegetarian, you can cover all your total protein needs with some of these tips that I'm going to show you a bit later. Moving into the pantry section. So these are beans and lentils. You've got so many different types. These are usually touted as being super high in protein. But when you break down the values per cooked beans and cooked lentils, it's anywhere between 8 and 11 grams per 100 grams. So as someone that needs to be consuming 30 grams plus of protein at every single meal, having 300 grams of any one of these products is going to be a lot of product, a lot of fiber, and something that my gut probably wouldn't be able to handle. But of course, we're not just relying on beans and lentils for our protein sources, we're layering in some extra proteins like mixed nuts, pumpkin seeds, and things like flax. A handful of mixed nuts, which is around 30 grams, is anywhere between 6 and 8 grams of protein, just in a handful. So always think about how you can add this as a snack or as part of your meal as well. The nuts highest in protein are peanuts, almonds, and pistachios. Moving further into the pantry section, we've got things like grains. Now grains like whole grain rice, for example, tend to be quite low. So per cooked value of 100 grams, you're looking at anywhere between 1 and 3 grams. Quinoa is a novel pseudo grain. It's not technically a grain. This definitely has more protein per 100 grams. And this is something that I use to boost up diversity bowls to add a little bit more protein. A way to boost the flavor as well as protein of your curries and stews and casseroles is something called nutritional yeast. Not only is it a source of vitamin B12, but it also gives a beautiful umami, and per 100 grams, this has anywhere between 40 and 45 grams of protein. So a little bit of the nutritional yeast goes a long way. Another sneaky way in which I used somewhat of a slightly processed product is looking at bean and lentil based pastas. This chickpea pasta, as an example, is made just out of chickpea flour and water. There's no egg, there's no soy, there's no filler, there's no protein powder whatsoever. This has got 22 grams of protein per 100 grams of cooked product. This is phenomenally high in protein. And if you compare that to average pasta, which is around 6 to 8 grams per 100 grams, this has almost got triple the amount. A lot of people forget about the freezer section, but there are some hidden high protein gems. The one that I think everyone should have in their freezer are edamame beans. These are around 11 grams of protein, super easy to either whip up in a blender in place of avocado to boost up an avocado toast, for example. This is a great protein booster that has lots of fiber and all those extra benefits because of the edamame soy content as well. Other ingredients are broad beans. These have around 6 grams of protein per 100 grams, and peas a similar amount. But they're just really easy to sneak into any meal to just boost it up ever so slightly. And then I tend to go for high quality frozen fish. With all these ingredients, the main principle to understand here is a concept known as protein layering. We are combining multiple different proteins rather than just relying on one. We want to start with a core protein source. This is doing the bulk of the work. It's giving us the most bang for our buck. We're not just going to rely on one of these. This could be your lean meat, your fish, your eggs, or your plant-based protein like tofu or tempeh. Next, we want to layer in a plant-based protein partner. This is where beans come into the mix, lentils, and they're not just adding protein protein, but they're also going to be adding all those other nutrients, mainly fiber. Think about it. You're having a spaghetti bolognese, add a tin of lentils. And finally, you want to finish with a protein topper. This is nuts, seeds, particularly things like pumpkin seed and hemp seed. These are really high in protein. It gives extra texture, a little bit of crunch, and it's a great way to add variety to your meal in the way of diversity, as well as that extra bit of protein too. And a top tip, look for things like tahini, which are blended sesame paste. You can add this to a curry as a topper or a little bit into the sauce as well. And things like peanut butter to top things like granolas or add to a diversity bowl. Let's use an example. Let's take a typical protein bowl. This one is using steak and this one is using tofu for the vegetarians and vegans, both of which have got around 20 grams of protein. Now, the easiest and laziest thing to do is simply to add more of the core protein choice. So in this case, it would be adding more steak, or for the vegans and vegetarians, more crispy tofu. But we don't want to do that. We want to add complexity and diversity to our meals. And the way we do that is using our formula. So we've already got our core protein source. And we want to add a plant-based partner. In this case, I'm going to be using beluga lentils, but you could use pui lentils, you could use green lentils, black beans, chickpeas, whatever you like. And just by adding 100 grams to your respective bowl, you've boosted your protein by around 8 grams or so, depending on your bean or lentil choice. The extra thing that I'm going to do is number 3 of our protein formula, which is a plant-based topper. It's going to add texture, going to add flavor, and because I'm adding pumpkin seeds, it's going to add a little bang of protein as well. On go the pumpkin seeds, but you could use hemp seeds, peanuts, crushed almonds, whatever you like. It's going to add those fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory, and this is something that is going to add a little bit more texture to your meal as well. Now, I want to be a little bit cheeky because I think you can experiment with protein toppers. In this case, I'm also going to be adding tahini. Tahini is one of those novel plant-based proteins. It's basically sesame paste, 100%. To give flavor to this, you could just simply salt it or use balsamic vinegar, but I'm actually going to use kimchi juice. Now, a lot of people throw away the juice of their ferments. This you can use, the brine essentially, into the tahini. This is going to add a fieriness to it. It's not going to overpower it at all. I'm going to add a tiny bit of salt, and if you wanted to thin it down, just add a little bit of hot water, tiny splash. So we have a beautiful thin sauce. Perfect. And even though it doesn't seem that much, around 30 mils, 40 mils of this, very gently increasing your protein content. Try it at home. To make things super easy for you, we've also got a cheat sheet of all the high protein plant-based foods that I tend to get into my weekly shop. You can find that in the description link below. So remember, the next time you're making a meal, think about layers: core protein, plant-based protein partner, and toppers. And if you want some healthy high protein recipes to get you started, head to thedoctorskitchen.com or download the Doctor's Kitchen app.